Labour is to recover from the Copeland by-election defeat, the low poll ratings and the soft coup and the infighting. The party must persuade voters that it can be trusted on the economy. John Mcdonald, the Shadow Chancellor, who spent last week looking over a cliff, joins me now. What did you see at the bottom of the cliff, John Mcdonald?
Well, I saw that it wasn't the way to go anywhere, and I think most people in the party saw that as well. We need to unite, and that's what's happening.
I don't know if you had a chance to watch last week's show when we were talking to Patrick McLaughlin, and I put to him the Resolution Foundation figures for income distribution over the course of the rest of this Parliament. Basically, the bottom 60% or so forth have a really tough time coming, as things are. What's Labour's plan to help them? Well,
the latest prediction as well is on the government's own forecast now. House of Commons have checked it out, and people lose about £1,100 as well. We're the only economy in Europe that's growing while wages are falling. So it's very clear what we have to do. It's very, very, very clear. First of all, people need a pay rise. We believe that there's a squeeze on living standards, and we believe there should be a real living wage. That's £10 an hour. We also believe that they need help with costs. So, yes, capping energy costs. We believe actually bringing rail back into public ownership will help us on reduced fares as well. But also we need to address the difference between men and women. We've still got a gender pay gap in this country, which is scandalous. All of those things can come about if we have a fair taxation system, if we tackle we can tackle tax evasion and tax avoidance, which is on an industrial scale in this country, end the tax cuts to the rich, as we've seen under the Conservatives, and to the corporations, and invest and grow our economy. This is not rocket science, this is basic economics.
Something slightly strange is going on, which is that your messages on all of that and on the NHS
really
and on social care are really popular, but the party is not popular, and that is probably because people don't think it all quite adds up. So can we go through some of the numbers?
Sure.
And can I start by asking for the definitive John McDonnell answer to how much the NHS now needs?
Right. The independent estimates now on NHS and social care is between 8 and 12 billion. We believe that the government now put aside, as is reported, 60 billion increased tax receipts in January have contributed to this as well, for a crisis in case there's Brexit. The crisis is here now in our social care and NHS.
So we shouldn't prepare for Brexit?
Well, we should prepare for Brexit, but some of that money now needs to deal with the crisis of the NHS and social care. It is a crisis.
So there's 12 billion for that. Let me run through a few of the other things. There's the cut for disabled people, which you have attacked as a very cruel cut, the £3.7 billion on personal independence payments. Presumably you would replace that.
Well, what George Osborne did last year, when he was reversed on PIP, he absorbed that money into the overall budget and contingencies. We'd expect the government to do that as well. He absorbed that. He found the money within contingencies to do it. We'd expect him to do that. This cut, remember what this is. This is 160,000 of the most disabled people in this country. The courts have ruled against the government.
Alzheimer's, it's people
exactly.
With all sorts
the courts have ruled against the government. They've got to address this issue. We cannot allow these people to suffer anymore.
All right, let's move on. You also want to reverse the cuts to universal credit and employment support allowance, which your office suggests is going to cost you £14.5 billion by 2020.
We'd look at two things, basically. We'd look at making sure we reverse the corporation tax cuts, and we'd look at a fair taxation system. We'd look at tackling, yes, tax evasion and tax avoidance, and we would be growing the economy as well. As we go forward now, we'll be publishing in detail all our tax proposals, obviously as we move towards the general election itself.
Sure,
but the overall principle about this is that we've got to have fairness back into our economy. That's why I'm saying the wealthy and others and corporations should be publishing their income tax returns so we can see whether there's fairness or not.
You said just now that the country needs a pay rise. That presumably goes for public sector workers. You said that you're going to end the current freeze on public sector pay. Now, if you go up by 1%, that costs you £5 billion and so forth. How much are you going to lift the cap on public sector pay by?
That'll be part of the negotiations. All these things,
presumably by inflation.
Well, we're looking to see what will come out of the negotiations. What we want to do is make sure living standards are not eroded in the way that they are now. And, you know, when you do that, what does that mean? It means people get a pay rise, of course, and they can. We've got at the moment 6 million people living below the living wage. We've got 4 million children in poverty. 2/3 of them are in families where people are at work. So the wages are just not coping with what people's needs are.
Right. So do you think that pay rise should be pegged to inflation? Let's jump back to the original question.
We believe it should make sure that people are not losing out in the economy. That means, yes, matching inflation, but there are areas where negotiations will settle at pay rises which are fair. I'll just give you this example. When, in the 1990s, I can remember campaigning saying that the directors of FTSE 100 companies were earning 50 times the amount of the average pay. We thought that was a scandal. That's now 180 times. We've got a grotesquely unfair society.
There's huge inequalities to be addressed, but I'm still going through the spending commitments, because you also want to restore maintenance grants for the poorest students and bring back the educational maintenance allowance for 18-year-olds, and that's another 4.5 billion. I'm just saying this is beginning to add up a bit.
Let's talk about how much has been given to the corporations. We're talking about 70 billion has been given away in tax to the corporations.
Where does this figure 70 billion come from? Because if you restored the if you didn't cut corporation tax,
between now,
that's 7 billion, not 7.
Well, between now and 2020, the reductions down to the levels that the government wants to raise is 70 billion. If it goes to tax havens...
Sorry, it's 7 billion, not 70. 7 billion a year.
If you add up the corporation tax cuts, the cuts to capital gains tax, the cuts to the bankers' levy, the cuts to the inheritance tax, it comes to 70 billion.
So you're adding all these things in?
Yes, of course. And then, if you look at what Philip Hammond threatened, which is to go to a tax haven Britain, so Irish levels of corporation taxes, 120 billion.
Well,
can't be acceptable in an unfair society.
Let's put those prospects to one side slightly and just ask you about two other things. Scrapping tuition fees, that's something Jeremy Corbyn talked about in both of his leadership campaigns quite a lot. Is that still on the cards?
Yes, it is, and we'll be looking at our tax proposals in the future about how we can afford that. But the big essence of this, you know, is if we start growing the economy again, if we start investing in the economy, we'll grow the economy, we'll be able to afford the public services that we need. The problem that we have at the moment, the economy is not growing on a scale that we want it to, but in addition to that, the rewards of that growth are not being distributed fairly. That's why,
in a sense, you have to say to people, cross your fingers and trust us. We will grow the economy so fast we'll be able to pay for these spending
commitments. Not at all. What we're saying is we'll have a fair taxation system, we'll tackle tax evasion and tax avoidance, we'll make sure there's no longer giveaways to corporations and the rich, we'll invest in our economy and grow the economy, and on that basis we'll be able to afford the public services that we need, and we'll also be able to afford fair wages. It's basic economics. This is sound common sense.
Okay. What was the soft coup?
It was a number of people, I think, stirring in advance of the Copeland by-election and the Stoke by-election.
You talked about plotters. You were clearly talking about more people than Peter Mandelson, who was sitting there and with whom you're now having tea, and Tony Blair. Who are you talking about?
Well, I think you say what Peter Mandel said that week. He said, every day I do something to undermine Jeremy Corbyn. I make a phone call, send an email. There must have been people on the end of that line, at the end of that email chain to receive it. Actually, what's interesting, as I say, I think we've all looked over the edge on Copeland and we've decided we need to unite the party now. And yeah, I will be having a cup of tea with Peter Mandelson. There'll be lots of things we agree upon. There'll be some disagreements. But I think the most important thing that we've got is responsibility to our party, but more importantly, to the country.
Would you go as far as to have a cup of tea with Tony Blair?
Of course. I'm willing to talk to anybody. We need advice from everybody. But we've got to get...
So literally, you're holding your hands out to Progress and that wing of the party?
Of course I am. And I've said I'm happy to go along and talk to Progress at any stage as well. Why? Look, I was on a march yesterday with NHS workers, nurses and doctors and people campaigning all around the country.
And that Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes, and Jeremy Corbyn. And we were there. Why? We were there to listen to people. On social care, our social care is in absolute crisis. The government's cut £4.5 billion from social care. Elderly people are not getting the care they need. They're winding up at A&E. They're then being treated on trolleys in hospitals. Then they can't come out of hospital because the social care is not there. We've got to unite the party to provide an effective opposition so that we can then form a government. I think Tony Blair, Peter Mandelson, myself, Jeremy Corbyn, all of us in the party realise the responsibility on our shoulders. And we're going to bear that and we'll work together to do that.
And whether you like it or not, all wings of the party are looking towards next generations of leaders. You've talked about various people, and the other side have talked about various people. Everyone's grooming people. How important is it, the so-called Mcdonald amendment, to lower the threshold? It is important. It's got your name on it because you tried to stand for leader and couldn't because of the MPs, to allow more left-wing figures to stand. How important is that?
Look, let's get this clear. I want to be absolutely clear. John Mcdonald will not stand for the Labour leadership ever in the future again. Full stop. I've made that clear time and time again. I've campaigned for the lowering the threshold for years, but it's not that significant to me because Jeremy Corbyn will lead us into the next election. Of course, we're building up a succession for the long-term future, and we've got some really great young talent coming through, but they need more experience before eventually they will succeed. Jeremy will take us into the next election. This amendment is part of the debate within the party, and that will be decided at conference, but it's not a big issue.
And what about the all those people on the other side of the party who'd like to go back to the original selection system? The moves that the party.
I understand. But look, we've got a huge party now. 500,000 new members, largest political party in Western Europe. I think our members don't want to go back to where there's just a small group deciding who's the leader. They want a democratic say, and I think that's the future. We're a democratic party now, engaging people, building within communities as well. And I don't think people want to ever go back to where decisions are made just by a small elite group.
John Mcdonald, future leader or not, come back again. Thanks very much for